Hey everyone, and welcome to Reboot It Rewind. I am Ron Swallow. This is our official after show for Reboot It. Today we have me, obviously, Ed Greer, and Billy Business to talk about our massive undertaking, rebooting Lord of the Rings.
Wow. This was probably the biggest in scope. Maybe this in Star Wars, but in some ways this one was even more daunting than Star Wars. It felt like.
Yeah, this one had at least as many comments that said, "Well, you guys didn't read this appendices of the this of the that of the this of the that, and that's why you don't get what's going on here." It had at least as many of those as the Star Wars episode.
Yeah, and some of them were really interesting and fun to read, and I enjoyed it because I do know a decent amount about Lord of the Rings, though not as much as some of our audience does, to be honest.
There are some flat out like dissertations in the comment.
Dude, I saw some going back and forth, which is really heartening because again, I think sometimes I come off as somebody who doesn't care about lore for every damn thing. And I think that is true to a certain extent because, again, if you care too much, especially with this much lore, but as you notice, when we started talking about the stuff, I think I was the one who wanted to go back into the Silmarillion and stuff like that and look at the early prehistory and that why would somebody be the devil of the elder gods? Why would Sauron be this grand evil? I thought it was pretty funny that we would be trying to do like 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 stories based upon this evil guy, and nobody gives a dang about why he's evil. I just sat through 2 dang hours of the Joker. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I don't know why there's a bunch of heartstrings pulled for that fool, and nobody cares how Sauron got like this. I don't get that at all.
Yeah, absolutely. I do like a lot of where we went, but before we do that, do you guys remember how you felt about it coming into it?
This was one where, you know, a lot of these episodes of Reboot Rewind, we've talked about how it's not necessarily advantageous to be like an evangelical fan of something going in. On the opposite side of that coin, I feel like this was maybe one of the first ones where like there was an active dislike from, you know, I don't want to speak for you, Ed, but I know that you've never been a big fan of it. And Bill, which I was kind of surprised, like, yeah, the movies are fine, but I'm not into this stuff at all. And I kind of think like instead of that being a detriment, I actually saw that as like, oh, this is a positive because now we have a clear goal, which is to make a movie that these guys who don't like this thing would actually see. That's why, like, if we ever do Harry Potter, something that I very much dislike and don't get at all, it'll be an easy goal because it's like we just need to make the one that I would actually go and see.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that was more like the goal of it, honestly. And if I could, I will speak for myself. I don't like this. I think it's very Eurocentric. I think the very fact that like when the men of the East come over the hill, they're all wrapped up in turbans and they're all uniformly evil and line up with evil. I hate the fact one of the comments was saying some jazz about like orcs aren't super soldiers, bruh. And I'm just like, and I'm not trying to make fun of that person because they're right. In that canon, there's such thing as an evil race. The elves got to inbreeding so much, the evil elves got to inbreeding so much that they got weaker, their power stopped working, their skin turned different, and they got to be these garbage people who Legolas can beat up 57 people. An orc, 27 of them can't beat up one damn hobbit. So yeah, you're right. In this weird, quasi-racist, certainly racial canon, orcs aren't super soldiers. That was the whole point of me making orcs into super soldiers because I think a lot of people kind of got on us for like there's not as much, confrontation of the racist nature or the racial nature of Lord of the Rings and the lack of diversity, blah, 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 blah. I just think when you look at the elves, they're kind of like, frankly, a lot of people perceive white people. They have a lot of power. They're revered as a people. And when they go bad, it isn't that they get weaker and get less influence and it takes 10 of them to fight you. There are very powerful people who are quite racist. You get what I'm saying? So yeah. I was trying to kind of make these treasured people be very dangerous when they go bad. Like, I don't know, when they become cops or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that was the point of making orcs into super soldiers, because it isn't that people who are bad and people who are willing to be bad in a bad army are weak. They're very strong, because a lot of those people come from privileged people. That was the point of making the elves turn into super soldier orcs. And that's why it was brilliant. I'm done.
Okay. Well, now that you've done tooting your own horn,
No, I think
toot,
there's.
toot.
I definitely want to comment on that, but I think there's a user comment coming up that we'll get back into that again. So I'll kind of hold.
Yeah, and I just want to say that I was nervous coming into it, not because of myself having to reboot this, but mostly because I didn't know exactly how you guys felt about those books. I knew Ed kind of disliked them, and I thought that I was going to have to end up like you and Billy and I were during Star Wars. I really thought that I was going to be real mad about everything you guys did. But I got to be honest, like I felt like what you did was respect the material while exploring where and what the material could be. And I think that that's when we do things from that point of view, respecting the material, but going, okay, well, what are some of the strengths? What are some of the weaknesses? And can we explore both of those things to make them better? That's what I felt like we did.
Well, I almost think that Star Wars made this episode better, because I think we learned right away that it's like I'm not trying to call you out or single you out at all, but I think it's like your criticisms of the product that exists are one thing, and then the reboot is another. And when you go too much like, well, they did this and that was dumb, that doesn't help us move forward with a new thing. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where you and I butted heads a lot on Star Wars. But when we came into Lord of the Rings, I think there was already this understanding of like, we know you don't like it. We know Bill doesn't like it. Ron and I do, but let's just start clean with everybody and move to a point that we all like it. And I think with Star Wars, it was like, let's run down the list of everything that's stupid about it. With Lord of the Rings, it seemed like, let's run down the list of what already kind of exists in this world and pick the things from it that interests all four of us, which just seemed like, honestly, like it's the evolution of just us as four people trying to work together as a group. I think like if you watch Star Wars and Lord of the Rings back to back, you kind of see how we've evolved, even in just like treating each other in a weird way, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And why don't we go to what we actually came up with, because I feel like that's where we're leading to right now. What we did was we decided to explore all of the separate aspects of the Middle Earth lore in like 6 to really 9 different movies, where we got to see who and what the wizards were, Aragorn in the world of men, hobbits, dwarves, elves, where Sauron came from. Why is Sauron so scary? You know what I'm saying? All while tackling class and race issues in a subtle metaphorical way, and then moving into the original trilogy as well, all leading to the Council of Elrond. The other thing we did was I feel like we truly explored the goals of the evil of Sauron and the power of the ring, so that it's even more clear how important destroying it is. I think the cast was truly inspired on this one. We got a lot of people, so give me a minute here. We got Ewan McGregor to play Sauron. We got Aragorn. For Aragorn, we had Sebastian Stan. We got Sam Neill for Gandalf, Jeremy Irons as Saruman, Frodo as Tom Holland. Yeah, Tom Holland. You
got one.
Yeah.
Actually, that's two. That's two. Yeah.
2 of them. I'm one, and I even got one Jensen Ackles in there at some point too. Mm-hmm. So, anyways, Sam Wise is Haley Joel Osment. Great pick. We got Wormtongue as Colin Farrell. Erwin is Gal Gadot. Eowyn, Florence Pugh. Gollum as Macaulay Culkin. Beautiful pick, Billy.
Thank you.
And then as far as directors went, we decided to go with like a few different people. For example, Michelle McLaren, Terry Fukuyama, and any other kind of like cool high concept TV show directors that we could pick up to do all of the different movies.
Because Billy pointed out very smartly that the movies didn't cost as much as we think. They look like they cost a whole bunch, but they didn't cost that much. It was just that they were very economical and reusing sets, doing a lot of model work, really doing the things you have to do to on an indie level, but on such a giant macro level of this.
It's insane. They spent about roughly 90 to 100 million on each one, so it's like you're talking 300 million for 3 movies. Nowadays I feel like you can't even make an Avengers movie for 300 million, you know.
Yeah, so and getting TV directors will facilitate that. They'd be people who have worked within a budget that they have to work in, and I think that would help because they also know how to make things cool. Michelle MacLaren, Game of Thrones, besides the one really dark episode, every episode she's directed has looked amazing and worked within the budget that they wanted it to work in. So businessy type of stuff on top of that. How did you guys feel about where we went with it, and how did you guys get to it? Well, we got a little bit from Ed. How about you, Billy?
I was actually like really pleased with where we ended up with this one. It's so tough because Peter Jackson's trilogy was, in my opinion, like just such a, like, it was such a chef's kiss. Like, I couldn't myself picture how you could do that any better. And I think we had, you know, I saw a lot of people in the comments compare our approach to The Wire, of kind of like each movie kind of building up these, you know, the politics and the standing of Middle Earth so that the stakes are higher when you get to the actual central wound of what Lord of the Rings is all about. So I was really pleased that you know, everything felt like fresh. It felt like our take on something, because to be honest with you, this is a tough one because we've never done something that was like based on like beloved literature. Like, we just couldn't rewrite Lord of the Rings. I feel like that's like if we did a Romeo and Juliet reboot, like we couldn't fundamentally change Shakespeare. You can't fundamentally change Tolkien.
Yeah, and I think what we did was, and I think this is a lot on of Ed's idea, but it also like got me super pumped up, and is part of the reason I was so pleased at the end of it, was that we really did explore every facet of facet is the word I'm using today, guys. Every facet of the Middle Earth lore, so that when you get to the end, just like Billy said, to reiterate, it made it more interesting to me. It makes it more in depth. And I got to agree, because a lot of people love the original trilogy. And don't get me wrong, I do like the original trilogy. I'm not like going to hate on it, but I actually had lots of problems with it. I felt like everything was rushed. And the reason everything was rushed is because there's only so much you can put into 3 movies. Like, you can't do a Marvel Cinematic Universe style thing with 3 movies. Whereas if we come up with 9 movies to really in depth look at all of these things, by the time we get to the original trilogy, we're like, oh, that's great. Now everybody really cares what's going to happen. And you get all these huge moments, I would say, as well.
Well, yeah, and I'd just like to address a couple things. I don't know. I guess there's something wrong with me, but this concept that like I like hate stuff and then don't have any way to improve it after that is like super preposterous. I'm not saying you guys are saying that, or not, I don't even know if the people in the comments are saying that, but it really, that part bothers me, because it's like there are things and stuff that you like that suck. There are things and stuff that I like that straight up suck. And only a 5-year-old would not go, okay, those things, these are the things that you update, right?
Yeah.
Most of the stuff that we like has been updated a billion times, as we stated in the episode. I know Legolas wasn't no dang ninja in them books.
Yeah.
I know he wasn't. I know he wasn't skateboarding down trellises and portcullises.
No, he definitely crowd surfs in the appendices. You just have to look there.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's like that.
It absolutely does.
So this concept that like there isn't any room for any change in these classics, there isn't any room to actually try to like look at a certain thing in a decompressed fashion. I guess it's from graphic novels. You know what I'm saying? Because in graphic novels, you can kind of go and look at the 2 years that Karen Page worked in Daredevil's office and do a whole batch of stories about that only have that framework. They don't have to worry about Stilt Man coming down the line. They don't have to worry about the years before when he didn't have no mask. They're worried about this section of time and expanding it so that we can play in that playground. And that was the whole point. And I think this movie is 100% better, frankly, than what we got. I'll say that. In my personal opinion, it's 100% better because you get to see why these things are happening, even if we only did 6 of them. If we only did 6 of them, this would still be as good or better than what Peter Jackson's done with the 3 and then the Hobbit. You know, the Hobbit trilogy, or did the Hobbit turn into a trilogy?
I didn't. The first one. I did not like the Hobbit trilogy. I did not like
the Hobbit.
So our 6 movies, I'll stack our 6 movies. I'll do the Pepsi challenge. I'll stack our 6 movies, starting from knowing what the villain is feeling. And even if we did kind of mix up the order and start with the Kingdom of Men, I think that's important because unless you know what men are doing during this time, don't nobody care about what elves and dwarves are doing. You are a man. You are a human, okay? No matter how many little elvish things you learn, no matter how many pages you flip, you're a human. Let's find out what the human beings think. Let's see that these nuclear weapons were disseminated amongst humans, elves, dwarves, and these weapons are going to be used to coerce these people into becoming evil and turn our dimension evil as per Sauron's design. Let's find out in a nice, decompressed, beautiful way how that happens over the course of 6 movies.
Yeah.
I'll place these 6 movies against anything they did.
Well, one of the things that we talked about, I remember that day, I think, Ron, you and I were, or Bill were like, because we batch shot, I think, a couple episodes that day, and we would take breaks. We'd take a half hour for lunch, but we would just keep the Skype or whatever open. And I remember we were talking about like the class differences between Sam and Frodo. The fact that Sam is essentially like a butler that is completely lost in the Jackson movie. They don't bother with class. And we hit upon this thing where it's like there's a lot of lip service, as Bill loves to say, to the idea that, the dwarfs don't really get along with the elves, but it's all just said like, never trust an elf. It's like, okay, I guess I'm supposed to surmise that you guys don't like each other. But it really, like, if you take the time to set up that Middle Earth is fractured within itself, essentially by the time you get to the Council of Elrond, you've created like an infinity war for yourself, because now you have all these disparate parts that have to band together to fight a worse evil, which, like you said, there's just not time in the current trilogy to kind of get that across.
And what's interesting too is like, now that I'm really thinking about it, Sauron also probably helped create this like hatred of each other.
No, we stated that in the episode. He goes to different people and he could peer to different people as their race and talk crap on all the other races, stoke fires, all that kind of jazz. And when you look at and we made the point that like 2 of the 4 races in this thing we're talking about are isolationist as hell. Yeah. If you think about it, 3 of the 5 or whatever races are isolationists, because you got the eagles who are isolationists. Yeah. you got the dwarves who are isolationists, and you have the elves who are above it all, and we're just not gonna, Well,
I would also, I guess I would kind of lob the hobbits in there too, because they just want to be left alone to kind of just hang out and smoke weed all day,
and smoke weed. Yeah.
Well, but I think
have second breakfasts.
Well, no, I think their whole thing was even in the books that Tolkien wrote, you can't rely on all these bigger, literally races to look out for you if you live with them. If you live with them, they'll just trample you underfoot without even thinking about you. You know what I'm saying? They, so I think they kind of had a selfish, if the whitest Wakanda ever, that seems to be what the Shire is.
Nice.
But I mean, like, with Sauron, I think one of the things that we really harped on, or at least that I was really pushing, was like, they call him Sauron the Deceiver, but here we had a trilogy of movies where Sauron is only seen in full body for 30 seconds, and then there's no real antagonist in all of this. It's like, he made those rings and gave them to every race without any of them knowing, like, oh, by the way, I have one that controls all of those. And I think that's something where, you know, it's glossed over very quickly in the prologue of Peter Jackson's films, but there was just, I was like dying to know what that story was. And then to kind of find out that Sauron is essentially Lucifer from the Bible and was, you know, a cast out angel. Like, there's a lot
when
of
I was doing my
there.
research, it was one of the first things that topped out at me is that he was basically Lucifer. That was huge. So like, last things last, everything we did to change this story came from the text. I will repeat myself. Every single thing we did to improve this text came from the text.
I mean, that's the point I was making. It was like, this one was a tough challenge because it's not like we were we weren't inventing new things, but it was looking at this massive kind of table of knowledge and being like, what hasn't actually been mined yet? And I was kind of surprised, but pleasantly surprised, that there was still a lot on the table without feeling like sacrilege to what kind of was already there, you know?
Yeah, but we also evolved it. And I just want to bring this up a little bit. I'm a big fan of Terry Brooks, who was, after Tolkien, probably considered one of the greatest fantasy authors of all time, I would argue. And now he has like 20, 25 books, something like that. Whereas Tolkien, he only wrote like 4 or 5 over a not very long period of time, right? And the thing about that is, like, I've seen Terry Brooks evolve. He started off very Tolkien-ish. You know, the elves hated this person, the dwarves hated this person, the world of men hated this people, like all of that stuff. And by the end of these last group of books, and the last, like, I guess 5 to 10 years even, it's all kind of doesn't matter who your race is at all. It evolved. And I would say that arguably that Lord of the Rings needed some evolving. And I like what Ed put into it. I like what you guys put into it. So I don't know, are you guys happy with this episode, would you say?
Very much so. I think this is one of the better ones. This was one I thought we were going to struggle a lot more with it than we did. If you were to tell me within the same month we were going to do G.I. Joe and Lord of the Rings, one of them's going to be really difficult and you're not going to really crack it until the last 30 seconds, and one of them is going to be like, you guys just get it right away, I would have imagined it would have been the other way around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, I mean, and I like the fact that we all brought our perspectives to it. I think everybody had to respect it enough, again, to know the text. The fact that I even know what the hell a Silmarillion is, the fact that I even knew that Sauron was, you got to have respect for the stuff to even diss it. I'll learn about you and your mama if he's going to help me in the snapping contest. You know what I'm saying? I'll read the whole dossier. And I could have just snapped on how white and whack this is for an hour. And I did not at any point. Every time I was like, this is white and whack. This is how it could be slightly less whack. There ain't no fixing the whiteness. And that's one thing we're going to get to in some of these questions or whatever. The main reason why I would tend to think that the race of man would be all races. And I would tend to think that if we did extend that to them, then the elves would all have different sorts of races, and the dwarves would have all different sorts of races. And we wouldn't have to lean so much on this. Orcs are an evil race. They're just fallen people who kind of fell into a bad doctrine. They're kind of radicalized, as it were. You
for power and strength and etc.
Right. So yeah.
Well, then there's this, before we get to the comments, there's one important question that we need to ask. And that's, Ed, did this actually get you to enjoy Lord of the Rings? Would this be something that actually got you to enjoy Lord of the Rings?
I mean, I would go see these movies because I feel like they would explore the actual world more. Again, these movies don't have an evil race. These movies don't have a simple villain who's a piece of cardboard for 6 movies. This movie, when you get the ring, you don't necessarily just disappear. All types of different stuff happens because more people get to touch the ring. so I can actually see what a big tragedy it is that the ring that ruled them all could be lost to some weirdo like Gollum or some power mad person or put back on Sauron's finger. Now I can honestly understand why any of this means anything. So yeah, I think so.
Awesome. So let's go into the fan comments that you guys left. We appreciate it every single time you guys leave us comments. It helps these episodes, but also it just makes us feel nice. So here's Stand Above the Crowd. Really enjoyed this episode, particularly Ed's takes on the orcs. I dig that a lot. I'm kind of surprised that race in the non-magical sense wasn't addressed at all in the episode. I thought for sure going in that it would be addressed. I love both the Lord of the Rings books and movies, but there's a fair deal of racism in Tolkien's description of the various bad guys. The good people of the North and West are described as fair, while those who side with Sauron are from the East and South. Even Peter Jackson's trilogy, they were coded vaguely Middle Eastern. I seem to recall a description of an orc that was Mickey Rooney in Breakfast at Tiffany's level racist.
That's a good level. That's funny.
That is funny. All of this to say, I'm surprised at, aside from a joking suggestion of Denzel, the unquestioned all-whiteness of the recast. Simply diversifying the cast would fix a lot of the yikes in the original text. If we're going huge actors, I'm liking Halle Berry for Galadriel. The woman has not aged. She's a real-life elf. How about Zahn McClarnon for Elrond? He's got them elven cheekbones, and he's a wonderful actor who's mostly done TV. Give him a big movie role. What do you guys think?
I'd agree with all that. And the reason why, and I'll just really cop out, the reason why I didn't mention that is in a real writer's room, I would mention that and probably get freaking fired. Just leave it alone. This is what it's going to be. And that's not, I just feel like writing the movie and making it good. Hopefully somebody in casting might come up with some great idea for that. But like I said, I think overall, if we just kind of even added the caveat that all the races would be all the races that exist.
Yeah,
that would solve a lot of problems. So you could open up, like, it wouldn't have to be so cordoned off. Like, it wouldn't have to be automatically the king of the humans is a black guy so that he can get tempted and screw up the whole kingdom. You know what I mean? They slip that slick stuff in there, man. You got to be careful when you diversify it. You know what I mean? So
yeah, absolutely. I got to say though, Zahn McClarnon for Elrond, that is literally perfect. That's perfect. I can't. That would work out fine. I have no problem. With that
handsome and dude, and more elves should be black just because, like, handsome and ageless. Don't look at me as an example. Just look at some of these guys. Handsome and ageless is kind of a thing. So there's a lot of handsome ageless black actors that could definitely stand, and tall and statuesque. There's a lot of ways that a lot of black actors who aren't looked at for elf parts because of the fairness doctrine. See what I did there? I think that's fine. But again, I'm gonna cash my check. I'm not gonna turn Lord of the Rings into like me trying to get Idris Elba to be an elf or whatever. They're gonna do that or they're not gonna do that. But gotta get the story right. So that's kind of where I came down on.
I guess for me, and maybe this is just like a prime example of my privilege, was that I until like a comment like this, I truly, first of all, let me just say, I came to Lord of the Rings first through the movies, and then the books was actually fairly recent. I think I was like in the middle of reading Return of the King when we recorded this episode. I guess I'm just like, I say like, I don't see color is stupid. But I just never thought of it in those terms. I truly guess I just didn't even think about the fact that, like, oh yeah, I guess like all the elves are white except the ones that turned bad and orcs, and they're kind of like, I don't know, in the movies to me that I think more of like a putrid color, but I guess yeah, Sauron's Uruk-hai
whatever race they're supposed to be, most of them are weak and dumb. I mean, at least I
think the point being, it's like, it makes total sense in terms of like the text, because I do know that like Tolkien thought that this was going to be kind of seen as like a weird like not alt history, but kind of like, the myths and the fables and the legends of kind of like Eastern Europe. Like Middle Earth was supposed to be before, I don't know, continental drift or something. Who knows? Who cares? But where I think that doesn't make sense for today, or really even then, is that Middle Earth and all this stuff is fantastical. So there is no reason why, the race of elves or the race of men need to be kind of like Eurocentric. And I guess that's just oversight on my part. I'll be honest with you. A lot of times, like a lot of these types of things just kind of go over my head. I'm just kind of like, ooh, that looks neat. Legolas is crowd surfing right now. I don't think about like the subtext to a lot of these things. And that's just kind of like me not paying attention,
Right, and not to try to Jesus it up, but I'll take responsibility for not being like, hey, why don't we mix this up, blah, blah, because even I kind of, on some weird stuff, because it's such a weird parable of whiteness, I almost, on some level, didn't want to sully black actors with this. I was mad. I was just like, all this walking and whack stuff. Nah, you don't want to go to New Zealand. Just go there on your own time, Halle Berry. But realistically, that's a failing on my part. I really should have thought more about. And like I said, though, I'm hyper conscious of the slick stuff. Finding a way to wedge a black person into a movie so that they can be the worst or the weakest to show how everybody else is great. There's a little bit too much of that. So I was like, I just keep it all white so they can all be judged by the content of their character for once. You know what I'm saying? Like that was kind of my thing, and that's probably wrong-headed. And I think too many black people who are in rooms, you know what I'm saying? They don't let their voices be heard about certain stuff like this. And that's how the cycle goes on, and we keep, So yeah, it should have taken responsibility to be like, everybody can be everything. So as we start casting, let's pick 2 or 3 and just sort of mix it up a little bit.
Yeah,
So.
and that's why comments like this are so important. We all have to be reminded to do a better job in making sure that everybody is included in the industry when we have that kind of power. And obviously, we're a YouTube show, and we're not actually casting anybody, but there's no reason for us to not be thinking on that level as well. And I'm sure that speaking for myself, that I will be doing a better job. For one, I just need to learn actors. I only know like 8. So
yeah, 3 of them are Tom Holland.
Yes, and the other 3 are Jensen Ackles, and then Jared Padalecki, and Jeffrey Dean Morgan, and then that's it. That's all.
Yeah,
that's all I know.
Oh, and just before we exit this topic for this section of the question, I just want to say something. Also, there isn't any doubt that we know out on an intrinsic level that there wasn't any period in England that had no people of any other race. You know what I'm saying? There was no even almost prehistorical period in Europe where there was only so-called white Europeans there. There was 0 times. 0. You know what I'm saying? So I think on some level we all know that, and I think it'd be better if we started acknowledging that in more production. So we're gonna do our part, Starship Troopers.
Yeah, absolutely. So on to this next comment. This is also another very deep comment. I love how deep the comments got on this specific thing. It makes me a fan of being a fan of this stuff. So Sam Anderson said, having the same structuring as The Wire was the genius nut to crack this whole thing. The only thought I had playing along with the show was, why gender the elves? Maybe it's just me, but I find elves to be non-binary creatures in general. This would also play well against the definitive divide between elves and dwarves, who again, to me, are heavily masculine in design, even dwarf women. Plus, having elves be non-binary plays into Aragorn being outcast by the world of men, etc. I mean, you guys have socio-political theming as to the core to each film. Why skip over gender politics?
Yeah, I could definitely see that, especially with the elves being like, I don't know, the elves being just the kind of like Pan. You know what I'm saying? The elves are kind of above it all, They're just like, hey, what's up, Aragorn? I think you're cute. No matter what, no matter what gender they would be, if they like you, it's like a divine being coming down and liking you. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't have sexuality is more complex for them or something. I can certainly see that.
Which is so funny because Lord of the Rings, at least the text is almost so sexless as it is.
Yeah.
Like the romance between Arwen and Aragorn in the films are like a lot of that is just invention,
It is.
Lord of the Rings was never like a super sexual thing, but I agree in the sense of like, if someone's like, is God a boy or a girl? I'm like, I don't think God is either. I think God is above a gender. So I am totally fine with that being the interpretation of, our elves. But again, this is another reason why it's like, the privilege of a straight white male, just you get blindsided sometimes, where it's not of malice. It's just like, oh, I guess I never even really thought about it, to be honest with you. But that's a great point. It's a great point to bring up. If we're touching all the other kind of socio-political issues kind of plaguing Middle Earth at the time, like that would definitely be part of it.
Yeah, and for me, this was the comment where I got in an unnecessary argument with some troll, basically. And I'd like to apologize for my words in that, but I also would like to say that my feelings about the whole thing is there's zero reason an elf couldn't be non-binary. No one has defined that. It literally is not a big deal, and elves are kind of like in the middle-ish anyways, arguably, in almost every single mythos about elves.
Yeah,
you could
there's
argue
an androgyny to elves, and 8 out of 10 interpretations.
Yeah, so no problem with that at all, and would gladly consider adding that in. So let's move on to Chad Hans. He said, I think for Samwise, I'd cast John Boyega, and for Gladriel, I can never say Gladriel correctly, I would cast Tilda Swinton. That's all I got. You guys nailed it.
John Boyega is an interesting choice for Sam. It's so funny because every role that I think of, like Attack the Block or Star Wars, like I just see him as being so much more alpha and aggressive, and I see Sam as so much more kind of not passive, but he's definitely Frodo's the alpha male in that situation. I feel like John Boyega would be almost like, he's too young for Aragorn, but I feel like John Boyega would be a really cool Legolas.
Yeah,
like he's got the Legolas energy. I kind of feel like.
Yeah, I think that's a masterstroke, Billy. I think that's a good role for him because again, but you see what I'm saying about the slick stuff. I'm not saying this commenter meant it this way, but John Boyega gets to be old timey janitor to Frodo, and he gets to take a lot of physical toll and carry his master to the point where this guy gets to get he's going to be the hero, but not get the credit for being the hero. It's almost like another. It's Finn, but way better. I totally agree with that. It's like Finn, but turned up to 11.
I mean, especially too, then you run into the problems of what is it, like the magic black character that comes in and solves because that's essentially what Sam does. Is he's the one that like basically saves the day for Frodo, essentially, in the Lord of the Rings story. So yeah, but again, that just goes to show, like, until you said that, Ed, I literally didn't even think about it. Like, I was just thinking, like, no, he's too manly to be Sam. So it's like, this is why I think this is a perfect example of why there has to be more inclusion, like, in more writers' rooms, because it's like, because of my privilege and the way that like I was raised, like those thoughts don't come in my brain. You need people with different thoughts in their brain, and it's not a woke thing, it's not a social justice warrior thing. It's like literally there are people out there with different experiences that can bring better ideas to you. And I think
Boyega would make the greatest elf of all time.
I think so too. Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah, he would be amazing. He would make a good dwarf too, though. Like,
well, I think
cocky,
you know what,
but either one of them would be great.
Just any, I think who would make a great. I don't know how to say it, but like there's a few people who would make great dwarfs. Well, squat. Like I love the fact that they pick like squat people to be dwarfs, because that's also about like body politics, right? Like you know what I'm saying? Like why do the elves get to be the only people who are like beautiful? Like what you know what I'm saying? In the Hobbit series, that dwarf fell in love with like an elf or whatever.
Right.
It's just like, where's the hot dwarf chicks, man? Bring them out. I know they're there. You know what I'm saying? There's different.
I actually think that was one thing that it's like, I wonder if that was, probably not, but I wonder if it was like a weird kind of course correction, because Keeley, the dwarf you mentioned in The Hobbit, is like, all those dwarfs are like attractive male actors. So it's like, they did a full about face from Gimli. You know, God bless Sala from Indiana Jones. But,
Yeah, Jonathan Rhys Davies.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a problem with that because, like, you know, like, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, right? If you think a dwarf is beautiful the way the dwarf is, then they should look like dwarves. I don't know. It just seems like
this concept of uniformity to races too. That we're not in Star Trek.
That's true.
You know what I'm saying? Like I saw more diversity in the way that orcs looked. You know what I'm saying? Than some certain things. Like when they want to put, you know, time into diversifying how things look, they do it. So it's like, just do it for everybody, every race. Dwarfs don't all have to look like Ram Man from He-Man.
Yeah, that was the one thing in Two Towers, where, or at least the extended edition of Two Towers, Gimli's like, yeah, it's hard to tell the women dwarfs apart from the men dwarfs because they have just as long of beards. You know, it's just like, really? That's what all of you? There's just like a whole mountain full of you? Ugh. You little, little
just
chicken
like
McNugget.
Yeah, just like, how could that even be? You know,
right.
There is diversity in every single type of life form, if you want to break it down that way. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look at how beautiful Ed, Bill, and I are. You know, we're just all very attractive people on a different level than normal people. Okay.
And definitely editing that out.
No, you're not. You guys are beautiful people. All right, coming up, we got Not an Inquisitor. Great name, by the way.
Nice.
The whole "but the Eagles" argument can be resolved by showing the Nazgul flying on their mounted stuff, and the only reason they don't fly straight to the ring is that to them, the ground and life forms on it cast a glowing interference that blinds them. The second an eagle picks up Homeboy with the ring, the riders can instantly see them as they rise out of the cloud of interference. It also explains how they have to ride on the ground and have trouble finding Frodo at the start.
I picked this comment specifically because I just wanted to hear Ron say "homeboy." I have no answer to their suggestion. The Eagles were, I think that's like the easiest, cheapest kind of criticism to lobby at Lord of the Rings, at least the films, and it's also kind of the most valid too. I never like that the Eagles are kind of just there to help whenever it's, because it's like, yeah, if they're truly on your side and they owe you one, like, what are you doing? Like, they seem to be pretty unstoppable, and at least in Return of the King, they take out those Nazgul like nobody's business. So I'm fine with depowering the Eagles a little bit, or just getting rid of them. I'm fine not having them.
Well, just to be clear and to be fair, one of the only ways that we were actually egalitarian and super race conscious in this whole dang thing was the freaking Eagles, because we made it be known that, like, they have their own agency. Not CAA. I mean, they have their own life. They have their own, like, just because you show up with your no feathered ass and your no talons on your feet and you're walking up talking about, hey, homie, go ahead and help me fly over here real quick. That doesn't mean it's gonna go that way. That doesn't mean they're just gonna acquiesce to what you say. They're not there for you. You, in this story, in this very story we said, they only got one to help them, right? They had to do something extremely honorable to convince this one eagle to use his flying privilege to help them in their quest. And then he paid the price because no good deed goes unpunished, and got shot down, probably killed, and they got spilled out across the forest. So they have to walk a bunch and meet up with each other, but they cut some time off the journey. And it lets you know that that's why they don't just get eagles, because first of all, every eagle ain't going to help you. And if you do get an eagle, you can get shot down.
I gotta tell you,
that's intrinsically better. Who's fighting against that?
I gotta tell you, the most important thing that you said there was that the part where they get to walk. The part is very important to me. Remember, guys?
I guess that's what I was saying. Like, if you didn't do that, if we hadn't come up with kind of that solve, I would have been fine just eliminating the possibility of eagles completely.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I personally didn't want to get accused of being like I said, all of the things I said about Lord of the Rings, nothing was subtractive. Everything was additive. Add some more Sauron time. Add some more intelligence and agency to the Eagles. Add some reasonings why they don't use them. Add some, you know what I'm saying? Add some of this stuff. Everything was additive, and everything comes from the text.
Absolutely. So moving on to our last comment is from Gary Yarbrough. He says, I wish we could get like a short film animation of each pitch at the end. Well, if you know anybody who can animate things,
I think that's
and
one
would like to do that for us.
I think that's one thing that we've been like really hoping for at some point is we know there's definitely a fan base for the show, and you guys have been so amazing kind of spreading the word, but like we want to see, like, you know, I've seen some really cool fan art from some of the fans for like other stuff. It's like, if you have like a crack at like what would John Boyega look like as Legolas, and you want to do a quick manipulation, like, send it our way. We'll post it. We'll probably put it in this show. We definitely want to see your stuff because you guys are a lot more creative when it comes to the execution of these ideas, probably than we could be. So if I'm not saying go make a 2-minute trailer for what we just pitched, but if you guys want to send us some of your art, we will definitely showcase it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I am saying make a 2-minute trailer that is animated and uses the people we suggested, but more than the people that we suggested, just have everybody be Tom Holland and Jensen Ackles.
No, you weirdo.
Dude, you got 14 years of Jared Padalecki and Jensen Ackles to look back on Supernatural. Why must they be in everything else? Dude, you have so much game tape.
Dude, I think Supernatural is like Avatar. You remember those weirdos that kept going back and back and back to go see Avatar? Like, yeah. You remember that people would spend like 10, 12 hours a day going to see Avatar just to live in the world. You would do that with Supernatural. You would go sit in a charger that just sort of rocked back and forth as demons hit the windshield. You would do that.
It's an Impala. Get your shit together. All right.
Oh God.
I will not have you besmirch Dean's baby. Okay.
Ron, I think at some point before we call it a day on Reboot It, we have to do Supernatural.
I would love that.
Just because I know that you wouldn't be able to use Jensen Ackles. There's
I'd have to cast somebody else.
And B, I just want to watch. I just want to watch Bill's face the entire time, just wanting to die and be anywhere else, but having to talk about Supernatural.
I also want that he has to learn a little bit about it, not like a lot, but just enough to know what the basic idea is.
By the way, there's a comment. I can't remember if it's on this video or if it was the other. Rewind we did, but someone's like, yo, producer Bill looks like Woody from Toy Story.
Oh my God.
And Bill was like, thank you, and he's like, no, it looks good. But now I can't unsee it after I was looking for comments.
Just putting the hat on him and the Western
There's
stuff.
a snake in my boots.
No, but I just would like to say, though, on the fan art tip, yes, any fan art you want to do, I just say do it as on the cartoonist kayfabe type rules, though. You have to make us look cool if you're going to depict us, or else we're not going to play it. And then also, please, if you want to use our suggestions or a combination of your own suggestions and ours, and kind of do a little ditty, fan art is always appreciated, man. It really is.
We could even make like a new little segment on these rewinds of like showcasing your stuff. So
so definitely send it in. We love that sort of thing. If you want to put me driving the Impala, I'm cool with that.
Now you're gonna be on the hood like Tawny Katane in a music video.
Pour some sugar on me. Okay, sorry guys.
We just got demonetized.
No, jeez.
No, that was short enough. And also, I didn't sound exactly like it.
Short enough and off key enough, and you don't
dump some carbohydrates on me.
Get this diabetes
in the name of Seal.
Yeah.
She's my apple fritter.
Well, I guess you guys, we encourage you to keep leaving these comments. Also, make some art. Like, go out and make that stuff. You guys are inspiring us. We hope you're inspiring. We hope we are inspiring you as well. So thank you for your comments, and thank you for checking out this episode of Reboot It Rewind on behalf of myself, Ed, and Billy. Thank you for watching.